Okay. Thank you everyone for joining today's the April 2025 Lunch and Learn sponsored by Envision Benefits Group and Milestone Financial Advisors. We've got with us today Walt Peretti from the Advocate for Business Office. He's got some updates for the Workers' Comp Board. I'm Adam Jester from the Greater Olean Area Chamber of Commerce, and as always, with our Lunch and Learn virtual Lunch and Learn series, we're doing this live as a webinar, but then we're also recording it. It'll be on our YouTube page, and the link will also be distributed throughout our newsletter and shared in our socials and things. So, Walt, why don't I turn it over to you, and I'll keep an eye out for questions. Any attendees that are joining us live, if you have questions as you go throughout, Walt has said that he would, be glad to answer those questions, midstream as you ask them. So if you want to put them in the Q&A, you'll see a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen here. Just open that Q&A button, enter your questions, and as I see them come in, I'll nudge Walt and read the questions for him. So, Walt, take it away. Thanks a lot.
All right. Hey, thank you, Adam. Thank you guys for having me. So today's presentation webinar is entitled Welcome to Protecting Yourself and Your Team. Okay. And we're going to go over coverage essentials for businesses, who needs coverage, who doesn't need coverage, the costs associated with getting the coverage, the penalties that come along with if you don't have that coverage, and how to control those costs through safety and loss prevention issue kind of like philosophy, and then what to do if there is an injury. And then at the end, as we wrap up, we'll have some resources and stuff for you. So what is the Workers' Compensation Board? Well, we were created in 1914 after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory occurred in 1911. A lot of immigrant women and child laborers lost their lives as they were locked inside sweatshop conditions, what we would call sweatshop conditions in this day and age. Locked inside of a building when a fire broke out. So the board was created to oversee the workers' compensation disability benefits. And then in 2018 came New York State paid family leave. We receive any reports of injuries. And we make sure payments are being made by the insurance carriers or payers. We also authorize the medical providers, the doctors and other medical providers that are licensed to treat workers' compensation in New York State. We have well over 1,000 employees with offices throughout New York State. Our biggest office is up in the Albany area, but then we have satellite offices, Syracuse, Binghamton, down towards New York City, etc. We hold hearings. So if you're ever injured on the job, and the employer says, oh, this individual didn't work for me at the time of the injury, or we're contesting this injury for one reason or another. So if there was a question as to the compensability of that injury, you'd appear before a law judge, kind of state your case. The law judge is a workers' comp employee. It'd be much like kind of like a court case on a small level. And they would decide whether, that injury is compensable or if it is not compensable. Okay. Our office, specifically the Advocate for Business Office, our advocate is Anthony Tomaselli. We're a small office. There's 5 of us in the office. So if you ever need us, whether you want to pick up the phone and give us a call, or send us an email, we're there to pick up the phone. If you send an email, our thing is, we'll probably get back to you that same day. If it's later in the afternoon, but, we'll get back to you by the next business day. But we assist, individual businesses with any type of coverage issue, questions they might have, as well as if they have a compliance issue. Well, I didn't have coverage. I hired my brother or my spouse to do some work. I didn't realize, he or she was considered an employee, and I didn't have coverage. So we can help work you through those compliance issues. And then like we're doing today, we work to educate business owners and government personnel on the system, how to be compliant, how to save money. We travel throughout New York State. We've been doing a lot more since COVID, doing a lot more webinars, but we're still available to travel, and do speaking engagements, et cetera, trade shows, safety conferences. And our office reports directly to our chairperson, who is Clarissa Rodriguez. So as we hear different concerns from businesses, if we're hearing a common theme, we can go right back to the chairwoman, chairperson, and we can bring up those, those issues that we might be hearing over and over, and see how we might be able to make the system better, both for the injured worker as well as businesses. Some of the coverage basics we'll go over. What does workers' comp cover? So it covers any type of on-the-job injury, illness, or accident. Okay, so if you were, if you were at work and you tripped on the stairs, or you developed carpal tunnel over a long period of time, or you cut yourself, generally that would be considered a workers' compensation injury, and you'd be entitled, to both medical coverage for basically for the life of the claim. So if you're hurt at work, you injure your back, and you have some treatment, maybe it's physical therapy, you go see a chiropractor. 5 years later, that injury starts acting up, that medical would still be covered. So you never pay any type of co-payment, lab testing fee, office visit fee, etc. That would all be covered by the workers' compensation insurance carrier. All right, and it also provides wage replacement. So in the event that you are hurt to the point where you have to miss a certain amount of time of work, you would be covered. You would get 2/3 of your average weekly wage, up to the maximum of the New York State average weekly wage. So every year that's indexed, so it covers inflation. So I think now the average weekly wage in New York State is somewhere around $1,782 a week. So if you made more than that, you'd collect 2/3 of that average weekly wage. You made less than that, you'd collect 2/3 of your actual wage. All right, and it's there to protect both the employer as well as their employees. Okay, so as you know, medical costs can be very expensive. So the employer gets the insurance, and that covers that business should one of their employees get hurt on the job. Okay, and also provides the benefits to the injured worker. Okay. So disability benefits, that covers anything that's off the job. So if you go home and you're raking your yard, or, we get a spring snowstorm, and you injure yourself, that would be fall under our disability benefits. Okay. You have to be under the care of a physician. It's not, you can't call in sick and say, oh, I want to collect disability benefits. There's only limited wage replacement. There's no medical benefits. So if you're injured at home, those benefit, anything you needed medically, that would be covered under your health insurance. You have to file a claim within that first 30 days of the time you become disabled. And you can receive a maximum of $170 per week for up to 26 weeks. Okay, so 6 months basically. And then paid family leave. As I said in that first or second slide, that came about in 2018. So it provides paid time off for employees in New York State to bond with a child, whether that's the birth, adoption, or foster care situation, care for a sick family member that has a serious health condition, and then assist when a family member is deployed abroad on any type of active military duty. Okay. So who needs these coverage and who doesn't need the coverage? All right. So we say, employees need coverages. Businesses with employees need coverage. And for workers' compensation, the first day that you're going to have payroll, you need coverage. So today's April 7th. If you were hiring, you had somebody you hired and they were going to be your first employee, they were going to start April 9th and on Wednesday, you would need coverage from that day going forward on the workers' comp side. With the disability benefits, you have a little more time. You have 4 weeks after their 30th day of employment. Okay, so you have almost 2 months to get the disability benefits coverage in place. But workers' comp, you need it from the first day that the employee starts to work. Okay, how do we define an employee? All right, so anybody that's providing services to a for-profit business can be determined to be an employee of that business. So even if you're helping somebody out, maybe a friend of yours has a roofing business or a deck building business, and he or she needs a hand on a weekend, and you go to help that individual out, you owe them a favor, might not be any compensation involved or what have you. You're still be considered to be an employee of that business. So if you were injured when you're helping that individual build a deck or put a roof on, you'd be eligible for benefits, and hopefully they had that coverage in place. And then any compensated individual that's providing services to a non-for-profit, all right? The exception being clergy and teachers in a 501c3. So like Sunday school teachers, priests, rabbis, etc., are exempt from having coverage. So who does not need the coverage? Who's exempt on the business side? sole proprietors that have no employees. All right. So if you're a one man, one woman operation, maybe you clean houses, or you have a landscape business and you plow snow in the winter. If you don't have any employees, you're exempt from getting that policy. Now, the caveat here is you can get the coverage and then you'd be covered should something happen to you. Okay. So that's a risk. It's basically, the way you look at it is who's taking that risk. So you can take that risk on for yourself as a sole proprietor saying, okay, I'm not going to get injured on the job. I'm going to work through any injury I might have. So I don't want the coverage. But if you take on employees, you can't take that risk for those individuals. Okay. So partners in a partnership, if you're a legitimate partnership, you're exempt from having coverage. Okay. If you're a one or two person owned corporation, all right, that doesn't have any other employees, you're exempt from getting that coverage. Again, you can go out and get that coverage, in which case it would cover, you, if you're a one person corporation, you and the other person in that corporation cover the both of you. If there's a lot of times we get 3-person corporations, president, vice president, secretary, one of those individuals would be considered to be an employee, so that business would need coverage. The other 2 members of that corporation could exempt themselves, but there would need to be a policy in place for that 3rd member. And then LLCs, okay? If the only people compensated are members of the LLC, so any type of LLC, LLP, if it's all partners, members, there does not need to be coverage. PFL, all right, that's not optional, okay, unless it's under those types of situations we just described. Some part-time or seasonal employees may qualify to be exempt from paid family leave coverage. All right, but they can only waive that coverage if they're working less than 20 hours per week and they're not going to work 175 days in a year. So a lot of seasonal businesses will qualify for this exemption. Okay. Somebody hires, they may have a fall cleanup business or, a landscaping business in the summer, and they just have part-time crew that works, 20 hours or a week or less, and they're only going to work, about 5.5, 6 months. Okay. Or if they regularly work 20 more hours per week, but they won't be in employment with that employer for 26 consecutive weeks. Okay. So think of it as like some type of part-time seasonal type of business, maybe around the holidays, you're selling Christmas trees or putting up lights, etc. They would be exempt from PFL. Okay. So disability benefits, like how can you opt in, opt out for coverage for disability benefits and the paid family leave? If you're self-employed or you're a sole proprietor, you can voluntarily opt in. All right. So again, if you want to cover yourself, because at some point you might want to take PFL if your wife is expecting a child or yourself is expecting a child, you want to stay home with that child, or you're going to adopt or get a child or through foster care. You can opt in. If you opt in within the first 26 weeks of starting your business, there's no waiting period on the benefits. So, you could get the policy, start your business, get a policy, opt in, and the next week, if you needed to take some time under PFL, you could do such. If you opt in after 26 weeks of starting your business, there would be a 2-year waiting period for you to take those benefits. Okay. Independent contractors. All right. So how do we determine if somebody is an individual is an independent contractor? Basically, does the hiring business control the time and manner in which the work is to be done? So you're an employee, right? Your employer tells you, okay, I want you to work 8 to 4, 9 to 5, etc. There's direction and control. Okay. But if you don't have that, where you might think you're an independent contractor, all right, we don't look at necessarily like whether you're paid on a 1099 or not. That's basically for tax purposes. So you can still get paid on a 1099 and be determined to be an employee of that business. All right. Do you have your own FEIN number, separate FEIN number? Do you file your own tax returns with the IRS under that FEIN? And you maintain a separate business establishment from the hiring business. Okay. So if you're, we also look at, are you integral to the success of that business? A lot of times we'll get companies where they have salespeople, outside salespeople, and those individuals don't have an office. They don't have to come in. They're paid 100% commission. They can, they can work the hours they want, etc. They're paid only when they sell, that product or service, whatever. But those individuals are still deemed to be employees because they're integral to the success of that business. They're selling that product or they're selling that service. So we would deem those individuals to be covered individuals, and their employer would need to have coverage. Also on our employer section of the website, you can visit that, a lot more information on who's covered, on who needs to be covered, et cetera. All right. Also have the Construction Industry Fair Play Act. So workers are presumed to be an employee unless they can prove they have their own business. All right. And you can go to that Construction Industry Fair Play Act right on DOL's website. Okay. General contractors. We get this a lot when we talk to the building trades people. They're liable for all workers' comp claims of all uninsured subcontractors. All right. So if you're hiring subcontractors or you're in the trades business, you want to make sure that you make sure that that your subs have that coverage in place, they have their own policy, and that they add you as a certificate holder, okay, on their policy. And that'll help keep your premium costs down, because anytime you make payments to a subcontractor, if they don't have coverage in place, your carrier is going to charge you premium on what you paid them. So what are the premiums and penalties? So premiums are calculated by payroll, okay, and also classification code. Every job in New York State has a 4-digit classification code. For whether it's a roofer, a typist, secretary, administrative, etc. There's a 4-digit classification code, and there's numbers capped and claims data capped on how dangerous is that particular business. Like, okay, in the roofing code, is there a lot of injuries? Probably yes. You have people falling off roofs, hitting themselves with a hammer, injuring their back, strains, that sort of thing. So if you're employing roofers, or you have a roofing company, you're going to pay more than somebody that's operating a call center for that coverage, right? So it's based on that classification code. And then how much are you paying those individuals? The rates are per $100 worth of payroll. So the size of your payroll, if you have a smaller roofing company versus a larger roofing company, obviously you'll pay a little less as that smaller roofing company. And how safely do you operate your business? All right, a lot like your car insurance. Did you have a lot of workplace injuries, over the last few years? Or, just same with your auto insurance. Did you have a speeding ticket? Did you get a DWI? Did you rear end somebody, etc.? If you have more injuries, or, more claims on the workers' comp side, you're going to pay, a higher premium. Carriers also do what they call an audit, payroll premium audit at the end of the policy year. Excuse me. They'll come in and they'll look at, you estimate, like, okay, I'm going to have X amount of dollars in payroll in roofing, and, X amount of dollars of payroll in office staff that, that's going to be answering the phones, doing my accounting and bookkeeping, etc. You estimate that payroll for that policy year. At the end of the policy year, your insurance carrier is going to want to look at those payroll records and see how much cost, or see how much payroll you actually had. If you had more payroll than you estimated, all right, maybe you had a really good year, you paid some guys some overtime to work on the weekends, etc. Then they're gonna bump up your premium. If you had less payroll than you anticipated and estimated, then you're gonna pay a little bit less in premium. They'll give you a premium credit. Okay. And the carriers also have administrative expenses. Like right now, there's about 240 carriers in New York State that are licensed to write workers' compensation insurance. Or you have the Hartford, Travelers, AIG, etc. And there's also the New York State Insurance Fund. The only thing the New York State Insurance Fund sells is disability benefits, paid family leave, and workers' compensation insurance. All right. They have to give you a policy. So a lot of times, if you're a smaller business, you go to your broker, whether it's your State Farm car agent or the Travelers agent down the street, they might not be able to give you a policy with their carrier because, maybe the carrier doesn't like to write smaller businesses. Okay. But if you go to the New York State Insurance Fund, they have to give you a policy. The benefits are the same, regardless of who you're insured with. Okay. So if you're insured with the New York State Insurance Fund, or you're insured with the Travelers or State Farm or the Hartford, the injured worker is entitled to the same benefits. Okay, it's the full medical, and then the indemnity benefits. It's a statutory benefit. So there's no difference, so to speak, in the policy. So our advice is to shop around, get some quotes, have your insurance agent or broker, get you some quotes, call around and get the best price you can, because the carriers, they add in their administrative expenses, and they try to invest those premiums, get themselves a good return, and hopefully pass that savings on, to their insureds. But our best advice would be, to shop around. The assessment rate which is a rate added to each policy that goes to basically funding the workers' compensation board operations. That rate is 7.1% of the standard premium. Okay. And for 2025, in 2024 it was 9.2%. So that's a 2.1% decrease in our assessment rate. So we're working hard, to lower our costs to the business in New York State. And that provides a potential savings of about $191 million for businesses across New York State. Okay. So how's disability benefits calculated? Okay. And disability benefits and workers' compensation, those premiums are paid by the employer. Okay. The employee can't be made to pay, for the cost of that insurance. Disability, again, it's $100 per calculated per $100 rate of payroll. The employer may deduct 0.5%, okay, which is no more than 60 cents per week. Otherwise, the employer pays the rest. Okay. On the paid family leave side, those benefits are totally covered by the employee. Okay. So unless the employer decides to pay for them. But the way the program came about was it was set up so that it would be no additional cost to the employers of New York State. So the employee pays that rate. The assessment rate for 2025 is 0.388%, okay, which is an annual maximum for the employee of $354.53. So that would be, and there's a calculator available that you can go online and see, how much the employee should pay, and then you can advise your payroll company if they're not doing it correctly. Some of the penalties that we have. So if we find that somebody doesn't have coverage, and our office deals with this a lot, where an employer gets a letter from us, and like I was saying earlier, I believe, I hired my brother, or my friend, I hired my friend and I got busy, I needed a couple extra sets of hands. I didn't realize, I needed coverage, I was only going to hire him for a few weeks, what have you. So there's a penalty of up to $2,000 for every 10 days that you don't have coverage, or the business doesn't have coverage. But we work to mitigate that as best as possible. So if something happens and, you're found to be without coverage, you can reach out to our office. You'll get a letter from us, from the Workers' Compensation Board. Just reach out right away. Don't stick your head in the sand. Get out in front of it. Call our office directly. Respond to the letter. Explain the situation. Go out. We're going to make you go out and get the coverage if you still need it. So if you still have that employee, whether part-time, full-time, family member, etc., we're going to say, okay, go out and get a policy. Send us a copy of that policy. All right. And then what we'll do is we'll look at, okay, how much was the premium? We're not going to charge you $2,000 for not having coverage for 11 days. If your annual premium was $1,000 or $700. If you have up to 5 employees, it can be a misdemeanor, subject to a maximum $5,000 penalty. More than 5 employees can be a felony with a $50,000 penalty, as well as a maximum of 1 1/3 to 4 years in prison. And then if you misclassify employees, like we said, we're back to our roofing example. If you say, I had less roofing payroll than I actually had, and you put that payroll in the secretarial pool or the administrative pool because you want to pay a lower premium, that misclassifying it is the same thing as being uninsured. So you'd still be subject to those penalties. So you want to make sure that, you're reporting the premium under those class codes. And generally that's what your carrier will do for you. And they'll look at those payroll records and say, okay, this, Walt Peretti here, he was a roofer. Okay, you paid him X amount of dollars. That has to go under this classification code. You want to make sure that those class codes are correct. Okay. Disability benefits, some of those penalties, it's 0.5% of the employer's payroll during the period of noncompliance. It could be a misdemeanor, subject to a $100 to $500 fine. So you just have to be careful. You just want to make sure that you have the coverage in place. You can always call our office if you have any questions as to whether you need the coverage, you don't need the coverage. We can walk you through why you would need it if in fact you do, and why you would be exempt if you didn't need it. So that's, you just want to make sure that you're asking the right questions, and then that you're compliant. Okay. Also, and this is a big one for a lot of companies, the debarment list, section 141B of our law. Basically, if you are found to be without coverage, you're barred from bidding on any type of public work contract or subcontract with the state or any other municipal corporation or public body, and that's a 1 year period. So if you don't have that workers' comp coverage in place, for a 10, 12-day period, maybe the coverage lapse, you forgot to pay the bill or what have you, you are essentially debarred, and you cannot get any type of public works contract, and that extends to permits, so building permits, et cetera. So you have to really make sure if you're doing any type of government contracting, even if it's with the local town, village, or county, that you're buttoned up and you have the coverage in place if you do in fact need to have coverage. You don't want to end up on that debarment list, because then those contracts will be canceled, and you won't be able to get any type of public contract for a 1 year period. Okay, so again, if you do get penalized, don't stick your head in the sand. You're going to get a letter from us, like we call it the GI letter, general inquiry. It's going to say, hey, we saw that you had payroll, we're wondering, we don't see a policy in place for your business, kind of what's going on. And it might be as simple as, oh, I started my business, I just paid myself this quarter for the first time, but I'm a sole proprietor. And then we would make you exempt. We say, okay, you don't need a policy. There's not going to be any penalty associated because you didn't need to have the policy. And then you just go about your business. But if you had an employee, part-time, family member, et cetera, full-time employee, then you would need that coverage. We'd advise that you go out and get the coverage. Once you have that in place, you'd send us a copy of the policy that showed the premium amount. And then we would look at that, premium amount, and we'd work off the penalty from that. Again, we're not looking to put you out of business or levy any type of extraordinary fines or penalties, but we also have to, we have to protect the businesses in New York State and the employees. So if they get hurt on the job, there's coverage for them. Okay, so how do you control your costs through safety and loss prevention? All right, you want to make sure the correct classification code is being applied. So if your business changed slightly over the year, or a couple of years, you went in a different direction, or maybe you did a little less manufacturing, and you maybe did some more automation, I should say, hired some robots, etc. You want to make sure the classification code is being used. All right. So talk to whether if you use a broker or agent, talk to that individual or talk to the carrier directly. Follow your claims, stay informed. All right. Make sure you stay in touch with that injured worker. Getting that individual in contact with your office while they're out, is a large part in determining the fact how quickly they come back, and if they do re-enter the workforce, and then make sure you're operating your business safely. If you've had a couple slip and fall claims over the last 6 months, what's the reason? There's, we always have wet spots on the floor. Okay, maybe we need to bring in some mats, or, oh yeah, we keep leaving that extension cord out. People are tripping over it. Those types of things. A lot of times they're common sense fixes, or little things that you can adjust to kind of cut down on your claim cost. Okay. If you wanted to start a labor management safety committee, all right, you can work together to avoid any type of incidents. You just need, no matter how big or small your business is, you just need to have an equal number of members, both from labor and management. You'd appoint a chairperson of that committee, and you rotate them regularly. Have a regularly scheduled meeting, whether that's monthly, quarterly, etc. Some type of agenda just to review that stuff. Some of the tasks you could do is visit the workplace, okay, review the equipment that the employees are using or the sites where they are, and then the procedures. You go into Home Depot or Lowe's, and most of the employees have some type of back brace on, so that they're lifting properly. Those little types of things can cut down greatly, on the rate of injury amongst the employees. So you want to establish those safe procedures, train the employees, whether existing employees or new employees coming in that you're hiring, train them for safety. Okay. The New York State Department of Labor also offers a free and confidential safety program. It's voluntary participation. They're not there. It's free of charge. They're not there to issue any type of penalty or fine. If they come to your workplace to visit, they're not going to run back and and tell OSHA or what have you, or fine you. They're there to work in conjunction with you to create a safer workplace. All right. They have OSHA trained staff that'll come on site and they'll visit. They'll help mitigate any type of safety risks that you might have. They'll do site hazard assessments. They'll do air and noise sampling. And again, it's a free service. So, if you're something thinks your business can use, you want to take advantage of that. The phone number is right on the screen there at 518-457-2238. And you can set up that free consultation program with somebody from the Department of Labor. Okay. You can also code rule 60, a safety and loss prevention incentive program. If the business voluntarily establishes a safety, drug, and alcohol prevention or return to work program, the business can save up to 10%, all right, in year one of those programs. And then year 2 and 3, they can save 6%. Okay, so that's offered through the Department of Labor. You do have to have somebody come in and set that program up for you. But they have a list of vendors, so there is some cost to you as an employer to do that. To hire one of those vendors to set up the safety, return to work, and drug and alcohol prevention, but it can go a long way into, kind of keeping your workplace safe. Okay. They they're all licensed and they're certified specialists by the Department of Labor. Carriers also offer this a lot of times. So, you can reach out to your carrier and ask them about Code Rule 60. They should have information for you. If you need additional information, again, that you can reach out to the Department of Labor through their website. They also, right on the website, they have a list of those certified specialists that they use. Also have model programs, so you can see what a program might look like, as well as additional resources on their website regarding that safety loss prevention program. Okay, return to work. Again, you want to help workers get better and get them back. Okay, if they can get them back quickly, there's more chance that they'll come back to work. Okay, if the research shows that the longer the employee is out, that injured employee is out, the less likely they are to come back to work. Okay, so you want to make sure you kind of stay in touch with the employee. And, maybe they were driving a truck and they hurt their back. Is there something they can come do in the office? Okay. Or do they have, okay, they can still lift, but they can't lift anything over 15 or 20 pounds. Okay. Can you design the job a little bit or modify the job so that they come back, and they don't have to lift anything over that 15 or 20 pounds? Okay. Any type of return to work thing. If they do return to work, even if it's part-time or a lesser duty, they can, and they're getting reduced earnings, okay, they can still collect that workers' comp benefit, okay, partial workers' comp benefit, I should say, because their disability or injury prevents them from working at that pre-injury level. So they can, they're not going to lose their benefits if they come back and work 10 hours a week. They'll still be made whole because they'll be able to collect that portion of their workers' compensation indemnity benefit. And again, medical care for a work injury or illness, it's a lifetime benefit. So even if they're, somebody's returning to work, they have to go back to the doctor, for that injury, whether, maybe it's to check on their back or take another MRI of their knee, et cetera. That claim cost is covered for the life of that particular injury. Okay. So what do you do if there is an injury? All right. You want to get that injured worker the medical treatment right away. Okay. And then you want to record the details. All right. What, where, when, and how. All right. You want to reach out to your insurance carrier immediately. Let them know if that injury is going to cause any lost time beyond the date of incident. If it's just if it's a first aid, we put a Band-Aid on it, he or she is back to work. You don't even have to notify the insurance carrier. Okay. But if it's going to require any type of medical treatment beyond that ordinary first aid, and usually by first aid, we need 1 to 2 treatments, so, if they got injured, they had to go quickly to an on-call or emergency room and, get a finger bandaged up or an elbow taped up. But were back for their next shift the following day. You would not have to report that to the carrier. Okay. The worker would file the employee claim form. That's the C3 that comes to the board. And the worker has to notify the employer in writing no later than 30 days after the incident. So if the individual goes home and they felt sick in the office or something like that, or they injure their back and they go home, and they have to report that injury within 30 days after the incident. So they want to make sure that that individual reports it. Okay. Can an employer ask their carrier to challenge a claim? They can always ask. Okay. It's the carrier's kind of job to to decide if they're going to go through with that. All right. The employer can ask the insurance carrier, say, hey, we don't think Walt, was really injured here. He came in, he was complaining about a back. People heard him complaining about his back, and then he said it happened at work. Okay. Some of the reasons why that you can ask them to challenge it is you don't believe it happened at work. Okay. Like the back injury. Walt came in this morning, holding his back or what have you. Or, he claimed that he got hurt on April 7th. His last day here was March 31st. He wasn't even an employee of ours, when that injury took place. Okay. Or the claim is fraudulent. We don't believe that, he's telling the truth about his back. He doesn't have any proof, etc. You'd reach out to your insurance carrier and just describe the situation to them and ask that they, look further into it, and then they'll decide whether they want to, challenge that claim with the board. Can you continue to pay employees' wages? Well, many employers will continue to do that following a work-related injury or illness, okay? But you can seek reimbursement for that, all right? So if you kept paying that individual and all of a sudden found out it was a workers' comp injury and it was compensable, you would seek, if you wanted to, you'd seek reimbursement of that from the insurance carrier, okay? And you have to make that claim for reimbursement prior to the award of compensation from the insurance carrier. Okay. So what do you want? Do you want to notify your insurance carrier immediately when your injured worker returns to work? Okay. So if somebody comes back to work, you have to let the carrier know, hey, Walt came back, for his job Monday morning. He's been out for 3 weeks, previous to that with his injury. If they are performing any type of limited or light duty with a reduced salary, they can still qualify for some of those wage replacement benefits. If they return to their regular old job at their previous wage, then they're no longer entitled to any workers' compensation wage replacement benefits. Okay. And if they return to work without disclosing it, then they could face fraud charges. Okay. And medically necessary treatment for that work-related injury is a lifetime benefit. So just because they come back to work full-time in their old job doesn't mean they're not entitled to ongoing benefits for to treat that injury, whether it's physical therapy, whatever it might be associated with that original injury that they had. Okay. Some of the resource you want to do as an employer, okay, you want to make sure that you have the required insurance. So if you need a policy, make sure you have it in place. Once you get that policy, the carrier is going to give you a poster. On the workers' comp side, it's a C-105. On the disability benefits, it's the DB-120. Paid family leave, it's the PFL-120. All that is a small 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that says, that this employer has workers' compensation insurance benefits. Here's the carrier information. If you're hurt, on the job, make sure you call this number. You display that poster, in the break room or where employees might generally congregate. It's just like the Department of Labor minimum wage poster. You display that as well. So you put that workers' comp poster somewhere in close proximity to that. So employees know that you have coverage and what they do in case of an injury. If there is a claim, you want to make sure that you report it in a timely manner. Okay. Let your insurance company know, again, if it's beyond that ordinary first aid, that there was an injury and that you're, that you're moving forward with it, or the individual seeking treatment, etc. Make sure they file that, the employee files that C3. And then section 120 of our law, workers' comp law, states that you can't discriminate against an employee for filing a claim. So you can't fire an individual because they filed a claim. Okay, they can only be terminated for a valid business reason. Okay, and again, kind of lead into this slide. You can't get rid of them because they filed that injury, but you can if there's misconduct, insubordination, lack of work, etc. And employees are eligible for these benefits: workers' comp, disability, paid family leave, regardless of their citizenship and or their immigration status. So if there's somebody in the country illegally or what have you, they're still entitled to benefits if they're working for you or they're injured on the job. Okay. If you were injured in 9/11, okay, you may be eligible for no-cost health care and or financial compensation from the federal government if you're a first responder, worker, resident, or a student in the area of the attacks of 9/11. If you want more information on that, you can go to ny.gov/September 11th. if those might apply to you. Okay. At the board, we started a new onboard. It's basically a new business information system. Gives you access to real-time claim status. We have some online self-service features as well as forms that you can download. If you go to our website, wcb.ny.gov and /onboard, there's a walkthrough and registration process. There's video tutorials as well as recorded presentations on our business information system if you want to become more familiar with that. Okay, also, you can always follow us. Like many other businesses, we have a Twitter, well, X account at Workers' Comp, at New York State Workers' Comp. We have a Facebook page, Instagram page, a YouTube channel. This presentation, I know we're recording it here. Adam's recording it now. Will be available, but it's also already available on our YouTube page. We also have LinkedIn. And if you want to sign up for notifications, you know, the quote unquote, the old fashioned way through email, you can do that. And we won't flood your email inbox. If you want to receive those notifications, you can sign up that you want employer notifications or injured worker notifications. And then we would send you, you know, subject numbers, et cetera, based on, you know, oh, I want the employer stuff. We're not gonna flood you with every piece of email that we send out. So you can sign up for that. Okay. Again, our office, and I'll leave this slide up if there's any questions. You can call us directly. 518-486-3331. You can always email us at advocatebusiness@wcb.ny.gov. Or you can go to our section of the website, wcb.ny.gov/AFB. And we're always there, small office, there's 5 of us. Somebody's going to pick up the phone if you call, you know, between business hours. You know, if you get us after business hours, leave a message, your call will be returned the next day. If you need us via email, you want us to put something in writing that your business does or does not need coverage, reach out to us via email and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. So if at this point, if you have any questions regarding this presentation or workers' comp in general, you know, feel free to ask. I'm going to go back to the slide with our information on it. So in case you want to take that information down, and just make a note of it in the future. If you have anything, just feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you.
Really, really good stuff, Walt. I appreciate the presentation today. And while we're waiting for any questions to come in, you mentioned a couple things. First of all, the slide with the guy behind bars will certainly grab your attention. That's just a reminder of how serious this stuff is. Going back to classification, I found it very interesting, and I think some who are watching this may also find it interesting that someone might be designated 1099 independent contractor by tax status, but may also, for account purposes, need to be classed as an employee. If there's specific instances and those sorts of things, is that something that businesses can reach out and just kind of give the instance and then kind of get some guidance on that, or is there a document that delineates that a little more clearly for them?
Yeah, on our website under the employer section, there's additional resource on it if an individual is a you know, considered a independent contractor, if they're considered an employee. There's like a 10-point test on there, and you can reach out to us directly. You know, but every situation is different. You know, when we try to, in this day and age, everybody says, "Oh, he's an independent contractor, she's an independent contractor." We don't look at whether you pay them 1099 or, you know, you pay them cash under the table, you pay them in Bitcoin or whatever. We look at their direction and control. Okay. And are they outside of that normal business? You know, so if you own a restaurant and the dishwashers, no matter how you pay them, is obviously an employee of that restaurant. Okay. But yeah, to answer your question, madam, yeah, they can reach out to us directly. They can go to our website. There's a test there. If it's a special situation or any situation, and they need further guidance, or they're just like, geez, I don't know. After listening to that presentation, you know, this guy over here might be my employee. I didn't think he ever was. You know, and we can help you with that, because the last thing you want is an uninsured claim. You know, that individual get injured and then the law judge finds that they were in fact your employee and you didn't have coverage because you thought they were you know, you thought they were an independent contractor. And the thing we're getting a lot more recently now with all the remote work is, if you own a business and say you're in Ohio and, you hire somebody and all of a sudden that person's in New York State, even though they're working out of their home and they're remote, you need New York coverage because, if they're working, even though they're performing, they might just be doing computer work in their house. They get carpal tunnel in New York State, they can file for New York benefits. We have very generous benefits in New York State for workers' comp. So that Ohio business-based business would need, they need coverage. They need New York coverage. Even though, they might be domiciled in Ohio, they have a New York exposure, somebody working in the state of New York. So we're getting a lot more now post-COVID with a lot more remote work and people hiring employees that aren't generally office-based, for 5 days a week. So yeah, but to answer your question, kind of long-winded answer, but yes, you have a question, go to our website, look for the answer there or call us directly or email us directly, lay it out, and we'll be happy to respond and we'll give you a definitive answer.
Okay, great. And just for those watching live right now, just a reminder that this is being recorded and will go into our YouTube channel, which can be found at youtube.com/the @Olean Chamber. Kind of a long URL, but that's kind of how YouTube does it. So it's youtube.com/@Olean Chamber. And there are a couple different playlists here, including some general tourism, some event recaps, but also our Lunch and Learn series. It's just coming up and running now. So it's relatively new, but this is something that we'll continue to fill as these presentations go. So if you have something that Walt covered that you'd like to see a little bit more about, or you'd like to go back to, this will be in there. I would hope by the end of the day, barring any tech issues. And as always, we want to thank our sponsors, Milestone Financial Strategies and Envision Benefits Group, for sponsoring the 24-25 season of the Lunch and Learn, the Greater Olean Area Chamber of Commerce virtual Lunch and Learn series. I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A. So again, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, Walt, and feel free to reach out to Walt through the contact that he had listed. And again, we'll have this video up for in our video library.
All right, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, like Adam said, you get a question tomorrow, next week, let us know. I'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
All right. Bye-bye, Adam. Thank you.
Yep, you got it. Thanks.